Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Michigan Military Technical and Historical Society Museum vehicle restoration video. Uh, so, uh, we've been working on the M37, kind of at a stalemate right now. We're waiting for the center section for the rear end to come back from the ring and pinion shop. Hopefully, it'll be back this week, and we can get this truck put back together. This truck is supposed to be at an event on Veterans Day, so I really need to get it put back together. But that aside, we've been kind of working on it while we were doing the rear end or working underneath it. We realized that a couple of the shocks were leaking quite badly, so we got a new set of shocks for it. I already got the front ones on. Rear ones are here, ready to go in. These are aftermarket commercial shocks that we got from one of the vendors. So we took they were Gabriel shocks. So we took the Gabriel stickers off and scuffed them and painted them with the OD paint. I got all the hardware to put the shocks back on, cleaned and painted, ready to go. I just got to crawl back underneath there and get them put on. The front shocks are on. You can kind of see. Same thing, hardware was all painted, shocks were painted and cleaned up, and we got those on. Hopefully this truck's never going to ride smooth, but maybe it'll ride a little bit better now, because they were definitely, the shocks that were on it were probably originals from 1952, from the looks of them, and they were pretty, well, at least two of them had leaked the fluid out of them, and they were pretty well dead. So new shocks should be a real upgrade, and we'll get those put on soon. Under the hood, we got the fuel filter all put back in. The oil has been changed, and a couple minor things that we've gotten done. But I'm going to come back here just for a minute, and I'm going to talk for a second here about rear ends, rear axles. So these vehicles, M37 and most of your military vehicles, most of your bigger trucks even today, use what is referred to as a full floating axle. In a full floating axle, only the torque is transmitted by the axle shaft. So the axle shaft is over here. It's been pulled out. So you can pull the axle shaft out of the rear end and without taking the wheels or the hub or any of that stuff off, because the hub floats on the bearings that ride on the actual axle housing. So a full floating rear end is a lot stronger, because the only thing the axle shaft does is transmit torque, and the weight of the vehicle rides on the actual axle housing. So you have inner and outer bearings. You have the ability to have bigger bearings, and distribute the weight over a larger area. And again, the only thing that the rear end is doing, or the axle shaft itself is doing, is transmitting the torque that makes the wheel spin. So, and you have the added benefit that you can just pull this axle shaft out. I was explained to one of the people that was helping me, in theory, you could pull these axle shafts out, put the vehicle in four-wheel drive, and drive it as a front-wheel drive vehicle. If you had something, if you had say you were in the field and you had a catastrophic failure with the ring and pinion or something of that nature, you could remove these bolts, or the nuts that hold the axle shaft on, run the jack screws in, pop that rear axle out, put this vehicle in four, and drive it around like a front-wheel drive car, or a front-wheel drive truck in this particular case. So, full floaters, much stronger, and just better for heavy-duty application. So I'm going to turn around here for a second. So over here, I have a spare rear end for the duster, or actually the duster that we have is a 6-cylinder, and it has a 7¼ inch rear end, and this is an 8¼ inch rear end for that car. So if at some point I decide to do a power upgrade on that car, this rear end is somewhat more survivable. But this rear end is what we refer to as a semi-floating rear end. So as you can see here, the studs that, so obviously the drum assembly is not here. We don't have any brakes on this, but the wheel mounts directly to this, which is the axle shaft. So the axle shaft mounts onto the wheel mounts on the axle shaft. So on this particular design, on a semi-floating rear end, the torque is transmitted by the axle shaft, just like it is on the full floating rear end. But the weight of the vehicle also rides on the axle shaft. So it's a slightly less strong, but obviously for like a passenger car, it's full floating rear end is unnecessary. A lot of extra parts, a lot of extra weight. But you can see here, the entire weight of the car rides on this single bearing that's just inside here that rides on the axle shaft. So the weight of the car, I can't get it, I'm not gonna mess with it. So the weight of the car rides on the axle shaft, and the torque is being transmitted by the axle shaft, as opposed to here, and then also the stress of the braking is also applied directly to the axle shaft. So you have the torque of the acceleration, torque of the braking, that is all coming on and off that axle shaft. When over here, the torque of the stress of the braking is on the hub, and you're minimizing that stress on the axle shaft. So really the axle shaft is just transmitting your momentum, your torque. And so that is our lesson for today. The difference between a floating and a semi-floating rear end. Semi-floating rear ends are like this, that are very common in all your passenger cars, light trucks. My Silverado still uses a semi-floating rear end like this. Anything really probably 3/4 ton and down. You get into the 1-ton trucks, you get up to a full floater. Our Cut V over here has a full floating rear end in it. You can pull that axle shaft out of there. So once you get up into like the 3/4 ton and up, you will generally see full floating rear ends, and 3/4 ton and down, or below 3/4 ton, and passenger cars you will see semi-floating rear ends. Just two ways to tackle the same problem. One in stronger, but also you have more weight, more moving parts, and here these are simpler, quicker, and they work just fine for what they're intended for. So there we go. There's our lesson for the day: semi-floating versus full floating rear ends. And hopefully soon, we will have the center section for this thing back, and we will have this truck back on the road. So stay tuned. Weather's starting to get cold here in Michigan. We're coming to the middle of October, but this broadcast, they're forecasting like 70-degree days this week. So, I'll take it, and give me a chance to come out here and do some more work and get a couple of more days in cruising in the Plymouth. So, everybody, if you're in the Detroit area, come by the museum, check us out. We got the tank on the lawn now. You can come see that. Visit our website, mimths.org. You can PayPal us money at mimths@mimths.org, so they can pay for the parts to keep these things running. You can see I got my lists on all of the vehicles already for what needs to be done this winter. So all the trucks have these cool little lists on them of what needs to be done to them while they're in storage for the winter. So again, like and subscribe. Come check us out over the winter. We got a lot of cool stuff going on. So everybody have a good day.